For me, it's always been about that witch. Yes, there's much more spectacle to be found in other elements in Stan Winston's Pumpkinhead, like the title creature, who we'll get to in just a little bit, but that haggard old witch who sets the nightmare in motion has always been the scariest element of the film for this writer. I recall watching the movie at the perhaps too young age of 9 or 10 and being riveted by the movie's spooky atmosphere and impressive special effects. But that witch scared the hell out of me with her gravelly voice, ghastly visage, and haunting laugh. One of the truly scary ideas in the film is that you might just stumble upon a shed in the woods if you went in deep enough. And within, you might just meet someone like that frightening figure who seems to know everything about you. Like a creepy figure from an old fable or nursery rhyme, the witch can grant your darkest wishes, but be careful what you wish for, because, well, we all know how that ends. But just in case you don't, we're going to invite you deep into the backwoods to discover one of the best horror movies you never saw, Pumpkinhead. Like a grim fairy tale tinged with elements of a slasher movie, Pumpkinhead thrusts you into an unfamiliar world where modern civilization is nowhere to be seen, and dark magic exists to bring your worst nightmares to life. Despite some recognizable machinery, this movie seems to take place out of time, where even such reliable conveniences as telephones aren't welcome. The woods and the hills, that's all there is for most of the folks who live wherever this is. One strength of the film is that it doesn't feel the need to explain away everything. The wheres and whens don't matter. If an idea is scary enough, the story will work. And this movie has a scary idea and some very scary things to show you. As with most horror films, Pumpkinhead needs to set the tone with its opening scene.
You'll fail and you'll die too.
We see a paltry little house in the middle of a foreboding forest. Inside, the glow emitting from the fireplace can't warm the spirits of a concerned family who look like they're in the midst of mourning someone. And in a way, they are. It's their neighbor who runs screaming to their front door, begging for help. But the patriarch knows the truth. He can offer no help. He can only protect his own and stay out of the nasty business that has come to take outside. For their neighbor has a debt to pay, and something has come to collect. Something monstrous, something completely unswayed by the man's desperate cries and screams. A young boy sees what he's not supposed to. Their neighbor has come face to face with pretty much the last thing you'd want to see before your time on Earth is up. The boy becomes a man. Ed Harley lives a very simple existence with a boy of his own. He's got his own general store that services, well, however many people live out there in the mountains. These people most likely aren't used to seeing many outsiders, but they do get some, unfortunately, for all involved. You know, in movies like these, that when the city folks arrive, trouble arrives right behind them. And our group of newcomers are a bit of a noisy bunch. Not rude, perhaps, but certainly out of their element and not afraid to make their mark on the place. A couple of them are dirt bikers, adding unwelcome sounds to the serene landscape. They're about to leave their mark in another way, and that will change and ruin the lives of everyone in an instant. Yeah, the city folks should have stayed in the city this time. So it goes that Ed Harley has only one thing on his mind after losing everything: revenge. Most reasonable people will tell you that an eye for an eye makes the whole world go blind. But try telling that to a man who lost his son, to a thoughtless jerk who could have avoided tragedy if he weren't so careless. So Ed Harley seeks out the witch. Her name is Haggis, and he asks for something he knows full well he shouldn't. The witch is going to summon an angel of vengeance to go after the city folk, although demon of vengeance is much more accurate. Pumpkinhead is its name, and once you call upon it, there's no turning back. even when you inevitably come to regret it. This is simple, campfire story stuff, made all the more rich because the filmmakers know exactly what kind of movie they want to deliver. Take away the dirt bikes and the cars, and the film could take place 100 years prior, as the essential elements of the tale are timeless. It's not very surprising that the film is based on a poem, though it could just as easily have been based on a myth or legend based down through the generations. In the world established early on in the film, we believe monsters and witches are real, and they're not easy to forget. Pumpkinhead marked the directorial debut of the Oscar-winning makeup designer Stan Winston, who was looking to try his hand at the art form after bringing the impossible to life on films like The Terminator, Aliens, and Predator. The story goes that the film's producers sent Winston the script in the hope he'd agree to create the monster at the center of the action. But Winston saw an opportunity to finally direct his own picture. He agreed to design and build the character, but only if he could direct his creation as well. And Winston proves with Pumpkinhead that he had the chops to effectively deliver a horror story to the big screen. It's not all special effects and blood and guts as you'd might expect, though of course all those goodies are in abundance once things get going. Winston knows that half the battle is creating atmosphere, and along with talented director of photography Bohan Bozelli, he conjures a very ominous world made up of shadows, moonlight, and lighting. The forest in the film would be a scary place to wander even without the towering Pumpkinhead lurking within, but when he does show up, he brings a real show with him. Flashes of light, unnerving sounds, a whirlwind of leaves and debris. What the monster lacks in subtlety, he more than makes up for with showmanship. As can be expected, he's an impressive creation. Winston apparently left most of the designing to his protégés while he worked on preparing for his debut, and what the guys came up with can now be considered a classic in the genre. Though his size is certainly intimidating, Pumpkinhead's withered, sneering face is one of the scariest things about him. It definitely resembles what a demon straight out of hell might look like. And the way he seems to enjoy carrying out his punishment is even scarier. Some crafty direction on Winston's part makes it so we buy Pumpkinhead's range of motion. And while he doesn't always necessarily look like he's walking and stalking on his own, without the help of some Hollywood magic, he's always impressive to behold. I'm sure most of us will take a practical effect like Pumpkinhead over a CGI creation any day of the week. As for his human co-stars, we get just enough personality and backstory to keep us involved in their plight. The horror of the situation in the second half of the film is elevated because we know that Pumpkinhead's targets aren't really bad people. Well, all right, Joel, the one who got them into this mess, is a major league son of a bitch, but the others seem just fine. As far as the performances go, they're natural and perfectly acceptable, with John DeQuino a standout as the aforementioned Bad Apple. We don't get to know the characters very well because this is predominantly Ed Harley's story, but from what we can gather, they're ordinary people thrust into a very unfortunate situation by one bad apple. But sometimes you're in the wrong place at the wrong time and you get a hideous demon sicked on you. Aside from Pumpkinhead himself, the star of the show is Lance Henriksen, finally getting his chance to be the main character after years of playing supporting roles. He's quite perfectly cast as Ed Harley, who wears years of hard work and hardship on his face. The early scenes between Ed and his son truly set a bittersweet mood, and Henriksen is up to the challenge of making Ed a believably serious yet compassionate father. Once things take a turn for the worse, Lance barely needs any words to express his pain and rage. That unforgettable mug of his says it all. The film also cleverly makes it so that Pumpkinhead even slightly resembles Ed, and vice versa, for they're linked until the end by an unholy bond. Lance would continue to make a living playing quiet men haunted by inner demons, perhaps most memorably in the underrated Fox series Millennium, but Pumpkinhead still might be his most satisfying performance to date. It's a shame Winston only directed one feature after this, the forgettable family flick A Gnome Named Norm, because he showed true promise with Pumpkinhead. Naturally, he would be very busy in the 90s with all sorts of phenomenal work, notably Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park, for which he won Oscars. So it's not like we were denied his talents. Still, he proved that he was more than a one-trick pony on his directorial debut. And if he hadn't been so darned great at helping other people bring their visions to life, he might have sat in the director's chair a few more times and showed us more fantastical sights. The great man passed away at the too young age of 62 in 2005. A true loss for the movie industry, as well as all who knew and admired him. If you love watching his handiwork in the movies of Spielberg and Cameron, you should do yourself a favor and watch, or rewatch, one of his most frightening creations, Pumpkinhead.
Welcome back to the Jeff Burr Appreciation Show. I kid, but here we are taking a look at yet another film directed by the highly talented journeyman director. This one's a strange one too. If I were to tell you the 90s horror flick included Kane Hodder, Andrew Robinson, Linnea Quigley, and effects by Kane B, you'd be all over it. Mention Pumpkinhead 2 though, and you get quick complaints. Look, it's not as good as the first one, and I'm not here to argue that, but it's a fun flick and a good deal better than what came after. For a great series retrospective, go check out In Praise of Shadows channel and his solid breakdown of everything Pumpkinhead after our review. Pumpkinhead 2 opens with credits and some sweet Law & Order type music, followed by a black and white scene of the Farron Woods circa 1958. A woodland woman is looking for a boy named Tommy to feed him his daily slop. Tommy is a sweet-intentioned but deformed man-child, and that just won't stand for a group of greaser knuckleheads.
Let's finish this thing once and for all.
They chase and beat him as well as the forest woman before stringing him up, beating and stabbing him above a well before dropping him into said well.
Dirty job. But someone had to do it.
Jump ahead 35 years or so, and Sheriff Andrew Robinson is the new lawman in these parts after coming home from New York with his wife and daughter. His daughter runs into the local crew of ruffians whose leader is the town judge's son.
You screw up one more time, I can't cover for you.
Hey, don't worry about covering for me. I can take care of myself.
This is your group of protagonists that show up in most slasher movies, but here, none of them are likable whatsoever, even the sheriff's daughter and eventual final girl. We then have our real protagonists in the same room together, with Sheriff Braddock and Dr. Pettibone discussing the town, her family of witch doctors, and then they finally meet the mayor. The mayor's name is Bubba, and of course the town mayor's name is Bubba. The bad kids and the youngest Braddock are hanging out, literally, at the site where Tommy was killed and dumped before the sheriff shows up to break up the party. Robinson is first billed, and rightfully so. Not only is he the main good guy here, but he also just has a hell of a resume. Of course, Hellraiser, Child's Play 3, and today's flick for us horror hounds, but he's great in the first Dirty Harry as the bad guy, and then the John Fallon favorite Cobra. The group of kids includes Punky Brewster herself, Soleil Moon Frye, J. Trevor Edmond from Return of the Living Dead Part 3 as Dan Dixon, TV great Hill Harper as Peter, and Alexander Polinsky as Paul. Polinsky moved almost exclusively to voiceover work after this movie, and he's made a nice career out of it. Finally, we have Amy Dolenz as the sheriff's daughter, Jenny. She is, in fact, the daughter of musician Mickey Dolenz and appeared in comedies and TV shows, including General Hospital. Sheriff Braddock asks his daughter not to hang out with the group of kids, so she does just that and continues hanging out with them. They end up driving way too fast at night on a highway, and even drive with the lights off for a bit, which causes them to hit Miss Osi.
It's our fault right here.
Where the fuck is she? Does anybody know where she lives?
Look.
I know.
Be careful. You're watching.
She has all kinds of cool K&B stuff, including the Book of the Dead straight out of Army of Darkness. She curses them with the curse of Pumpkinhead before they go dig up a grave and use some blood from a vial on the inhabitant of the grave. As you do. So, I'm sure you can tell, but there really isn't much to do with the Stan Winston classic that preceded this movie. That's fine, but this and nearly every film after changes the rules of what Pumpkinhead is. How he operates, who he kills, and even how he dies is different than what we're told previously. It certainly loses some charm that way, but I suppose it had to do with licensing a film sequel and getting a script out fast. Pumpkinhead rises from his tomb and we find out that Miss Osi is in the hospital, but not looking good.
We've got her at the local clinic, and it's just a matter of time.
The kids agree that it needs to stay with them, and the older folks, the woodland folks, start to fear of what is coming after all of them. Pumpkinhead kills poor Joe Unger, an actor who worked with Burr on Texas Chainsaw 3, who plays Ernst, and it's the best look we get at old Pumpkinhead. He has his off-red predator vision and some flashing lights accompanying him, but he's there in all his special effects glory. After this scene, we get mostly half shots, and the strobe light effects are much higher. Sheriff Robinson doesn't buy that it was an animal, but he also doesn't quite think it's a mythical Pumpkinhead creature either. We get the most random Linnea Quigley sex scene I've ever had the pleasure to witness, and that's saying something before her and her lover are attacked by our guy. He kills the man, whose identity becomes important later, but Quigley makes it out unscathed. Well, physically anyway. The scene is one of my favorites actually, as a sweet country song plays as the gourd noggin, sorry I just got tired of saying Pumpkinhead, breaks the guy's back. They find blood wings written in blood, of all things, on the wall, and here's where I'm going to take a little departure. Blood Wings, Pumpkinhead's Revenge is a PC game released just a little while after the movie. Does it have anything to do with the movie? Barely, but as our former video game guy, I feel like I have to throw it out there. The game's a first-person shooter, I suppose, where the player kills enemies and collects crystals that unlock poorly rendered clips from the movie. The controls are bad, the graphics are bad, and the game itself is in fact bad. It was developed by BAP, or BAP Interactive, who created the far more terrifying Sonic Schoolhouse, and published by EA of all companies. It got terrible reviews and was rightfully forgotten to time. The kids all get together and assume Jenny is a snitch to her dad, while the judge tells the sheriff to keep doing his job. The sheriff reveals that he knew the deformed boy who was killed in the beginning, and that he actually saved Tommy from dying at one point. This comes out of nowhere and probably would have been good information to have considering where the events have taken place, but whatever. The jerk kids go back to the grave to confirm what they already know, and decide to make it easy for Tommy and hold up in one place for the night.
There is a good explanation for all of this. Until we find out what it is, we're sticking together.
Kane Hodder enters the chat in a cockfighting ring that draws our pumpkin's ire, and yet another witness was left alive in the now catatonic sister of the victims. The sheriff and the town doctor Scooby-Doo their way to the hospital to see if they can get anything out of Miss O.C., and she tells them, already dead mind you, that Pumpkinhead is taking revenge on both the men who killed Tommy 35 years ago, and then go for the ones who wronged her.
This is a nightmare. She's dead.
She does give them a necklace that will apparently defeat him, so you know they got that going for them. We find out what the 5 victims have in common, and once the 6th is dispatched, he'll go after the kids who started the fire in the old woman's home. Our actual heroes figure out that the blood wings represent the jackets of the men who killed Tommy, and that the 6th man with them that day was our very own judge. Judge Merle Dixon. Wait, like the Walking Dead guy that Rooker plays? That's a strange coincidence. Anyway, they go after him, but they're a tad behind Pumpkinhead, who attacks him in his home.
Holy shit!
But only after Danny begins to hold the other kids hostage after they threaten to go to the cops. Judge realizes he is almost certainly next and calls in the militia to help him, but his time is up. With blood wings painted all over his house and guns that won't help him, he's brutally killed off. The kill scenes are actually pretty well done in this movie, if a little tame. They did have to make some cuts in order to avoid a viewership-killing rating of NC-17, even though it was decided that this movie would go straight to video. It has some really good production value, and honestly, you have to credit director Jeff Burr with that. The script is lackluster, and some of the chosen actors mail in their lines. The performance he gets out of Robinson and the way the movie is shot in general really elevate it above its direct-to-video standard. And that's not to say direct-to-video movies can't look good, but I had no idea this wasn't theater-bound until after I watched it. The script and story were authored by a couple of guys who only have this movie to their credits, and whether or not they were aliases or this was their only shot, the story doesn't always gel, or even make complete sense. Pumpkinhead, now free of the 6 men that killed Tommy, turns his sights on the teens that were cursed earlier in the week. He picks them off one at a time in a mostly satisfying fashion. 2 of them get a spear through each other with shades of Friday the 13th, and the ringleader joins his judge father by getting his head completely twisted off. Down to just Jenny, Braddock confronts Pumpkinhead, now just calling him Tommy, and pleads with him to spare his daughter. He has punished both his murderers and the ones that attacked Miss Osi, and is reminded that Braddock even saved him once upon a time. Tommy lets the girl go, but is blown away by the very late posse, whose guns work better than any other gun in the movie, and he even falls into the same cavern on the same hook that he did years before. Even though the puppet or costume doesn't hold up when you see the full body, the music playing while he dies the same death as before makes it impossible not to feel bad. Braddock finds the fire truck he lost there as a kid, and the medallion sways as it cuts to black. Like I said, Pumpkinhead 2 isn't a masterpiece or better than the first entry, but it's a fun watch and easily the second best entry in the franchise. It just crossed over enough to get the Scream Factory treatment that is sadly way overpriced and out of print, but you can rent it from multiple streaming services, and it's worth your time. While the plot and ideas of the movie are lost at times, that's kind of the pre-Scream identity crisis of the 90s we had with horror movies. Give it a shot when you're looking for those lost gems within the various horror series. You'll be glad you did.
Don't call me slick. I didn't like it in high school and I still don't like it. Name's Ernst.